Hello, I'm Tony Guida, and this is My New York. What a program we have for you today. We celebrate the 25th anniversary of a classic New York movie.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Hey, Mom, what do you think?
You look like a gangster.
By the time I grew up, there was $30 billion a year in cargo moving through Idlewild Airport. And believe me, we tried to steal every bit of it.
And they damn near succeeded. The movie, of course, is Goodfellas. It's the result of a book and screenplay by legendary crime reporter Nick Pileggi. Our guest today, you will meet him next. I'm delighted to welcome to the program the legendary Nick Pileggi. Nice to have you here.
Good to see you, Tony.
A critic by the name of Ebert, no less than Roger Ebert, wrote of the Goodfellas, "No finer film has been made about organized crime, not even The Godfather."
Well, that's excessive, I think. I mean, The Godfather, I think, is one of the great movies of all time, if not the greatest gangster movie. And I like two, even more than one. So just to be in a sentence or a paragraph with those movies is a great honor.
Yeah, to be on the list.
Oh.
Goodfellas, your book was called Wise Guy.
Wise Guy, yes.
And then the movie came from it. And the Wise Guy was the guy we saw in that little clip, Ray Liotta, who's playing Henry Hill.
Right.
You knew Henry. What kind of a nut job was this guy?
Well, he was exactly who he is. He was a hustler. He was a street guy. He was always working. He was obviously had energy beyond any way of controlling it. He became enamored with these wise guys and mob guys who were in a taxi cab shop across from where he lived. And he just fell in love with that lifestyle. He loved the idea that they could play cards all night and nobody bothered them, that their cars were parked in front of fire hydrants, the cops never went by, that the priests walked by and tipped their hats to the mobsters. They were the most powerful people in that neighborhood. We're talking about Ozone Park near Howard Beach. And
they were so respected.
And highly respected by everybody in the neighborhood.
You talk about, if you go to the church out there, tell our viewers about what they'll see in the church in terms of respect.
Well, I mean, these are men who, you've got to remember, most of them, the smart ones, came through Prohibition. And they made enormous amounts of money giving America the booze they wanted and just made fortunes. They then were able to be, some of them, very charitable toward the churches, many of them very religious men, by the way. They could kill you and be a daily communicant at the same time, and there were more than one of those. I mean, it's astounding. Right. Well, there's this one church in Brooklyn on 65th Street where if you walk in, it's a beautiful church with great stained glass, all of it contributed by mostly a couple of grocers and a hardware store man, but most of it by ex-bootleggers and wise guys who were in gambling and that kind of stuff. And you look up, and in addition to the usual angels, with the little things and all that, to the corner, if you look at the corner, you got three guys in overcoats and fedoras and their wives and children right there on the ceiling.
On the ceiling, a frieze.
Yes, a frieze of this family. Now, they are one of the families, or the family, that contributed most of the money to that church. And it's right up there. Just go and take a look at it.
And a crime family.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's named. It's one of the named families.
Okay.
Well, that'll show you the acceptability that they had at a certain point. This is all, you have to remember, all of this happened before Joe Valachi, before Kefauver, before everybody began paying attention to organized crime. Back in those days, even the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI refused to acknowledge that it existed. He said there's no such thing as organized crime. He said there are organized criminals who work in different cities, but they're not organized together in any way, which of course was totally wrong.
Right.
So there was no public attention, no law enforcement attention, or God knows congressional attention to looking at them at that point, because they had contributed almost all of congressmen who were elected out of the New York City area. I mean, Meyer Lansky's son, for instance, Paul, never wanted anything to do with any of this business and wanted to go into the military and wanted to go to West Point. This is Meyer Lansky's son. So I was talking to the Lansky's daughter, Sandra, and I said, how did your brother graduated from West Point. How the hell did he get into West Point? She says, oh, a congressman appointed him, because in those days a congressman would write him in and he would get accepted. And I said, who? And she named the Brooklyn congressman who did it. I mean, that's how hard it was for them to move into legitimate society at that time.
Henry Hill, the wise guy.
Yes.
Of course, at the end, rats out all these guys. Were you surprised? Was he surprised that he wasn't whacked?
I'm surprised. He's surprised. The FBI is surprised. Ed McDonald, the U.S. attorney who actually ran this whole investigation, he's even more surprised.
And is in the movie.
And he's in the movie. Yeah, he's the prosecutor in the movie. I mean, he tried to keep it as authentic as possible. And the irony is Henry died about 2 years ago of a heart failure, and he was in his early 70s. And everyone else, all of those guys who wanted to kill him, all of the guys he testified, they all died before he did. Most of them in jail, in prison.
And probably perfectly typical of Henry's life that he outlives these guys. This is a guy who never could take yes for an answer. I mean, they put him in the witness protection program, and he just couldn't adapt to real life.
No, not at all. In fact, they kicked him out of the witness program. I mean, because he just wouldn't do what they told him to do. In writing the book, he didn't tell them. In other words, it was set up where if you're going to interview Henry, the marshals had to be there, and it was very complicated to get to him. And after one or two times, he says, and he wrote down his number where I could call him. So I called him, and we made an appointment to meet without any agents, without anybody, and we'd drive around for a couple of days, and I would interview him that way without going through the official witness program. Now, I wasn't in the witness program. They couldn't kick me out. Right. They'd get mad at me, but they couldn't kick me out. They could kick out. He couldn't care less. He had no sense of duty or any sense of loyalty at all. It was just, you got to score on that day. You make as much as you can that day. Let tomorrow worry about itself. That was his whole philosophy. As a result, he was what they call an earner. He made a lot of money. He was in and out of everything. He was just in and around, and always came up with schemes and scams and deals and debts that could be collected. And they loved him for that because they admired that kind of go get it.
Right. Let's talk about what you're doing now, working on a proposal, I think, about Frank Costello, the Prime Minister of the underworld.
Right. He's just a fascinating character, and he bridges a couple of periods, and I think he's always been the most fascinating to me. He came as close as anybody could ever come to total legitimacy. I mean, when all these guys are out there shooting each other and acting like idiots, he was at the 1932 Democratic Presidential Convention with the leader of Tammany inaugurating Franklin Delano Roosevelt as president, the Drake Hotel in Chicago. I mean, that is where Frank Costello is on that night.
There were those who said of Frank Costello that he was the leader of Tammany.
Oh, there's no question. He was. Yeah, he was. He ran Tammany at that time because he controlled all the district leaders. He was the one who he took the district leaders and even the election district captains, he took them away from the Irish, who had totally dominated that world. Mm-hmm. And those neighborhoods wound up being predominantly Italian-American. That's the Italian-Americans. However, they always had Irish district leaders because that went back a couple of generations. And Costello was the one, what is this crazy? We need our own district leaders. So he began mobilizing it. Some of the Irish district leaders came around with tough guys to beat up the other, but Costello being Frank Costello, he didn't have to worry about tough guys. So all of a sudden the Irish guys went to Westchester or wherever the hell they went. But Costello then took over those Italian neighborhoods, Greenwich Village, East Harlem, etc., and began to control it.
Nick, what will the project be? A screenplay for
It's a movie? Screenplay. It's a screenplay on his life and the story of Costello. And he's essentially the guy who almost made it. I always thought of him and think of him now as the real Great Gatsby. In fact, he even had a house in Sands Point. where Gatsby's house was. And his house, Costello's house, of course, was on the water. And he looks across, and there's the little lighthouse that in the novel Gatsby looks at to the world he can never enter. And of course, Costello never really entered that world. He came very close, but never could make it.
It's a torturous process from write a screenplay, Nick, to actually seeing something on the screen. But
yes. Well, the torturous part is not mine. All I have to do is write the screenplay. So, I have background, I have history. I've been covering this stuff for 50 years. And I have a lot of friends and agents and retired agents. And there's lots of great books written on the subject. So the material is there for me. And once the screenplay is done, you then have to get, screenplay is one thing. You can pay a screenplay. Hollywood can pay for a screenplay out of petty cash. But once they say, okay, let's make this movie, now you got to think of actors, a director, and now you're talking about $45, $50 million.
Right.
Screenplay is 120 pages. How many people do you know who will give you $50 or $60 million on a 120-page proposal? Not many. That's a tough. So that's a built-in problem of getting movies made because they're so expensive. But you hope they do, and if they don't, you just go on and write another one.
Write another one.
Yeah.
And one you wrote and has been turned into, I think, a shooting script is about another fellow from the old days named Gregory Scarpa.
Greg Scarpa.
Who was Greg Scarpa?
Greg Scarpa is a fascinating character because he is the New York version of Whitey Bulger.
An informant.
An informant, but really an operative for the FBI. When I mentioned earlier that J. Edgar Hoover refused to acknowledge that the FBI, that the mafia existed or a mob existed, he was rudely awakened in 1957 when they had the Appalachian meeting. They caught 100 guys from all over the country.
Not organized, but they're just having a party.
They just had the little gathering. Guys from Philadelphia, Chicago, everywhere, all over the Colorado, Los Angeles, and Texas. And so now Hoover was really pilloried by the Congress. So he went into a unit called the top echelon informant unit, which meant that his agents in the major cities like Boston and New York would try to flip somebody who was in the mob, operational, working, flip them to become helpers to the FBI in being able to lay out and get indictments and wiretaps against organized crime guys because they had no access to them. They had very, very few informants. So this was the first thing they did. These were major mobsters. You didn't go and get a little guy. You got as big a guy as you can to get as much. In Boston, they got James Bulger, his boyhood friend, John Connolly, who was the FBI agent, got to him. In New York, they got a guy by the name of Gregory Scarpa, who's a capo in the Colombo crime family, the warlord of the Colombo family, a murderer of at least 25 people that we know of. A really crazy person. But very charming and interesting in other ways. He became a top echelon informant for an FBI agent 35 or 40 years earlier. He was a top echelon for about 35 years. So he goes back to the 50s. And he was incredibly useful to the FBI. They were able to bring down and get information on organized crime in New York that had never been in the FBI's
Well, one way, a startling way in which he was useful, I think, is in your screenplay and will be in the movie, I would assume, is how the FBI apparently used this killer to solve an extraordinary murder of 3 civil rights workers in the South, in Philadelphia, Mississippi, 1964. Tell us that.
Well, what happened in that case was this was a voter registration drive going on, and 3 civil rights workers, working on voter registration cases, suddenly disappeared.
2 guys from New York City.
2 from New York City.
And a black a man from Mississippi.
Right. And the Bureau was trying to figure out what did it. The Bureau figured out immediately who the killers were. They were Ku Klux Klan members. One of them, a deputy sheriff, of course. And so what had happened, these kids were driving along. The deputy sheriff arrests them. brings them into the Philadelphia jailhouse and alerts the KKK guys. We're going to release them at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. So when they release the 3 kids, the KKK guys are waiting for them in a truck. Follow them, pull them off, kill them, and bury them. Lyndon Johnson, who was in the middle of the whole civil rights action at the time, said, this is outrageous. We have to find these kids and accuse the culprits and, get rid of these guys.
And we have to understand the context. This is 1964.
Right.
Civil rights is exploding across
Yes.
the country. Johnson can't afford the embarrassment of a crime like this not being solved.
Especially when the governor of the state and the officials in Mississippi who were fighting civil rights on every level. I mean, if you could bring back slavery, they would be the happiest guys in the world. So you're fighting that, and the governor of the state announces, nobody hurt these kids. These kids are just hiding to get bad publicity for us in this civil rights.
Right.
So it became incumbent upon Johnson, find those kids. So he gets the FBI, find those kids. And the FBI doesn't know how to find them. They can't go down there and beat up a bunch of sheriffs because that'll get them in more trouble, because the state police and the sheriffs, for the most part, and the governor and the mayor are all against these civil rights kids. They're pro-KKK.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say
Many
it.
of
but
them
it's true.
were in the KKK.
Yes, absolutely. So that's what you've got. And the FBI can't do anything. And there's one agent in New York said, well, maybe there is one way we can do it. What's that? He said, I've got my top echelon informant, namely, though nobody else in the Bureau knew who he was, Gregory Scarpa. He said, I say we send him down. We know who could tell him. He'll find out for us. So they did. The FBI sent Gregory Scarpa down, flew him down with his girlfriend, who I've also talked to about this encounter. Fascinating stuff. And Gregory goes down to Philadelphia. One of the KKK guys had a television shop and sold television sets. And the agent from those days drives Scarpa to the shop. He says, duck down. Scarpa goes in and says, hey, I want to buy that television set. The guy's, I'm about to close. No, I need it in a hurry. I'll pay cash. And he takes out 5 $100 bills and puts them in the guy's pocket. He said, don't even write it up. He said, I'm okay. But I hurt my back. Can you help me carry it out? Sure, the guy says. He's got 500 in his pocket. He goes out. And of course, as he's about to put it in the trunk of the car, whack. Scarpa hits him on the top of the head, tosses him in. The television falls to the ground. I mean, Scarpa has done this many, many times. He's no longer in the trunk, no sooner in the trunk. He's got tape around his mouth. He's got him tied. And they take him to a shack, which apparently the FBI had arranged and wired. So he takes him in the shack and he starts beating the hell out of him. And the guy lies to him twice. He tells him.
He lies to him?
Yes, he lies to Scarpa. Okay, I'll tell you.
The
He's
bodies are
buried
here.
under the.
Yeah.
Or he's buried. And the first time Scarpa goes to the door and the agent is outside, who is hearing from the Bureau, no, that's a lie. We've already checked it. It's not there. They goes back, beats him up some more. And that doesn't, he lies again. So now Scarpa has very little patience. These guys don't have patience. He can't kill him. So he takes out a razor. I don't know if I even go into the horror of this. And unzips the guy's fly and begins to cut him with a razor. And the guy lives it up. And Scarpa says, I only nicked him. I don't know what he was yelling about. I only nicked him. So the guy gives up the right place. They find the bodies and the whole thing resolved. They grab Scarpa, take him out of there, fly him to Florida to pick up his girlfriend, and they go back to New York. Case closed. FBI found these bodies because of their informants and work they did and the hard, diligent
and money they spread around.
Right. And they found out no one ever attributed it to Scarpa officially. But it's been written about, and enough people know about it, and enough agents have written books in retirement. And Gregory Scarpa's girlfriend, who went down there with him, has told the story as well as
I can't wait to see this movie. The screenplay by Nick Pileggi, and I assume it'll be called Scarpa.
Yeah, I hope that should be the
Maybe,
title.
I mean.
Yeah. And it's fictionalized to a degree that we've made up an entirely fictional FBI agent who stays with Scarpa.
And at what point is the film now? Have they started shooting?
They've got the script. They're in the process of casting, and their plan is to start pre-production in January. And the happiest note is they're going to shoot it in New York. They're shooting it in Brooklyn, Bensonhurst, and Fort Hamilton, which is where a lot of this happened. So it'll be great.
You started at the AP
Yeah.
as a police reporter
Yes.
and focused on crime, and you have built this extraordinary reputation for contacts both in among crime figures and among law enforcement people.
yeah.
Why that interest? Why write about these people?
Well, I was fascinated by them. I mean, who am I going to write about? I'm going to write about, tennis players. I don't know any of that. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from Bensonhurst. Went to New Street High School. I went to LIU. I mean, I didn't get out of Brooklyn until I went to work at the AP. So, and not unlike Henry Hill, I grew up in Bensonhurst. I knew those guys. I saw the power they had. I saw the influence they had. I saw the benevolence of some of them. And I saw that a lot of these young guys I was growing up with who were going in that direction were really mean guys. You didn't want to have anything to do with them. And but that's the life they were taking. So I knew them, and I was always fascinated. Who were they? Remember, there is no such thing as organized crime. If you lived in that neighborhood and you knew who these people were, you knew it did exist. You didn't need J. Edgar Hoover to tell you it existed. But I was curious about to learn more about them for myself. For why wasn't I one of them? Why was I, going to school and trying to be a writer? I mean, there was something that happened there, and that was it. And then when I wound up working at the Associated Press, I started working there as a reporter in 1956, and that was just about the time the feds and everybody else began focusing on organized crime as a major story. Remember, The Godfather. There was no Godfather until 1970 when the novel came out, 72 when the movie came out. So there was the attention we now know, post Gotti and post. None of that was focused for anybody back in the middle 50s. It's sort of fascinating. 52 had the Kefauver hearings, where Frank
organized
Costello,
crime.
yes, but nobody really focused on it. It wasn't like it is now.
I know over the course of your career, first at AP and then New York Magazine and onward, you've heard critics who say you write, not you necessarily, one writes about these people and it glorifies them. How do you...
I don't know how you glorify them when you show and write about the terrible things they've done and who they are. I mean, there's no glory in that. There are people, however, who feel if you write about anyone who is bad, you're glorifying them. So I understand that. I mean, we shouldn't write about Hitler maybe because we're glorifying him. We shouldn't write about Stalin or Pol Pot. But I don't take that point of view. In other words, a lot of people I think feel, or I've heard in debates or conversation, that by simply writing about them, you are glorifying them and encouraging people to want to be Hitler. I mean, I don't follow that exactly, but that's the basic theory. So how can you not write about organized crime? It's one of the most influential, or was one of the most influential things in our political life.
It almost reminds me of the kind of criticism that I've heard, and you've heard, we're both Italian-American as it happened, that entertainments like The Godfather and your things are somehow slurs on Italian-Americans, which I always thought was nonsense.
Well, it is. But, but I don't blame them. It's my Uncle Joe theory. Uncle Joe, Gay Talese's father, was always yelling at me about, writing.
Really?
Yeah. And, what do you write? Why don't you write about Michelangelo? Why don't you write about Leonardo da Vinci? Why don't you write about all these wonderful things? And you find me an editor who wants me to write a book about Leonardo da Vinci, I might do it. The thing is that nothing happened. This is current. These men are involved in life in America today. They're involved politically. They're involved in labor unions. The nation is a nation of gamblers. Every state in the union except Nevada makes gambling illegal. The only way it works is that they control it. They are the guys who take care of all of the illegal gambling in the country. How do you avoid thinking about them? And for the most part, if they're not Italians, they're Jewish.
Right.
They're the old bootleggers, the Italian-Jewish combine that started it. And then later on, African Americans came in with numbers and stuff.
Nick is not only, of course, a great reporter and screenwriter, but a producer. And one of his more successful productions was a film called American Gangster
Yes.
about Frank Lucas
Yeah.
from right around here.
Oh, yeah.
Can you profile Frank Lucas in?
Yeah, Lucas is just fascinating. He got 15 years for narcotics. And a couple of agents said, you got to talk to him. He's a great book. He's a great book. So I went up to prison, and I got very friendly with him. I'd go up and visit him in prison. And we would talk, and he'd tell me things. And when he finally got out, I realized that he was the story. And what he did is a street guy. He was a bodyguard for Bumpy Johnson, who was the mob boss up there. He figured out that the great dope was coming from Vietnam. These addicts in New York were saying, this dope is no good. The good stuff is in Nam. It's in Nam. So he got on a plane and went to Thailand and bought heroin right there. Bought the stuff and brought it back, refined it in New York, and sold the best Blue Magic, it was
Brought
called.
it back in
Brought-
coffins.
And he brought it back during the Vietnam War period, and he brought it back in coffins of deceased American soldiers, as well as other things. And got it into this country and began selling it. He was the biggest, so much bigger than Nicky Barnes. They all bought from him. The mob bought from him. Organized crime guys were buying from Frank Lucas.
We need to push the schedule and expand this show, which I don't have the power to do, but I wish I did. It's a delight to talk to you, Nick.
My pleasure.
Scarpa, the movie, we'll be looking for that. We'll be looking for something about Frank Costello. And it's a delight to see you and get a chance to talk to you.
Good to see you again, Tony.
All right. And we look forward to seeing you next week.